Imagine stepping into a boardroom to negotiate your salary.
Mm.
Or, well, perhaps just sitting down at a really tense dinner party.
Oh, dinner parties are the worst for that.
Right. Like the conversation suddenly veers into highly controversial political territory, and you have the facts.
You know the subject matter perfectly.
Exactly. In your head, your argument is completely flawless. But the second you open your mouth, you just lose the room. The whole argument falls completely flat.
Yeah. And it's not because your numbers were wrong.
No. And it's not because your logic was flawed either. It's because maybe you used an absolute statement instead of like a nuanced buffer.
Right. Or you use the active voice when the situation desperately called for the diplomatic cover of the passive voice.
Yes, exactly. Because language in these really high-stakes human interactions, it isn't just about transferring information. It's a complex psychological strategy.
It really is. And the stakes in those moments are incredibly high because human communication, especially at that level, is inherently tied to ego. It's tied to our identity and our defensive reflexes. When we talk about mastering a language, whether it's a second language you're trying to perfect or even just your own native tongue, we often mistakenly treat it like a math problem.
Oh, totally. Like it's just binary.
Exactly. We think if we just memorize the right vocabulary list and apply the correct syntactical rule, we will automatically be understood and respected.
But the reality of complex societal discourse is just completely murky.
Extremely murky. It's this intricate landscape of tone, pacing, and strategic concessions.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're pulling our insights today from a truly fascinating auditory masterclass. It's produced by a program called PodZone.
Yeah, hosted by Emma and John.
Right, Emma and John. And they've designed this rigorous guided course specifically targeting advanced C1 level English proficiency. But what makes this source so incredibly compelling is that this is absolutely not a deep dive about memorizing flashcards.
No, not at all. Or conjugating verbs.
Yeah, we are not going to sit here and quiz you on spelling. We are diving into the actual architecture of persuasion.
We're going to examine how Emma and John break down the language required to debate 3 massive, culturally explosive touchstones.
Yes. The insidious nature of hustle culture, the devastating socioeconomic impacts of mass tourism, and the intensely debated relevance of traditional university degrees.
Our mission today is to look at the machinery behind the words. We are looking at how we talk about what we talk about.
Right.
The goal is to provide you, the listener, with a robust psychological and linguistic toolkit to navigate those highly nuanced topics. Because when you're dealing with C1 level fluency or just advanced communication in general,
having the vocabulary is what, maybe 10% of the battle?
Exactly, 10%. The remaining 90% is mastering the confidence, the critical thinking, and those structural strategies that let you articulate complex, ambiguous realities.
Without triggering a complete defensive shutdown in your audience.
Precisely.
So I want to ask you directly, the person listening to this right now, think back to a recent argument where you felt misunderstood. Did you sound a fraction too aggressive?
Or maybe slightly too uncertain?
Yeah. This deep dive is designed to bridge that exact gap between the brilliant thoughts in your head and the physical reality of how those thoughts land in someone else's ear.
We're going to use these 3 high-stakes societal debates from the source material as our training ground to build that linguistic muscle.
And we begin this journey on the most intimate battlefield imaginable, our own minds and our own bodies.
Before we can even begin to debate global macroeconomic policies, we have to look at how we linguistically frame our own daily survival.
Which means we are starting with the modern phenomenon of hustle culture.
It's the ideal starting point, really, because it dictates the underlying rhythm of our waking lives.
Yeah. The Source Masterclass begins by forcing us to confront this deeply ingrained cultural paradox. Like, why is the state of being completely burned out so often glorified as a badge of honor?
Despite the fact that every shred of medical and psychological evidence tells us it's incredibly harmful.
Right. And the source defines burnout clearly. It is chronic physical and mental exhaustion.
We aren't talking about being a little bit tired on a Friday afternoon.
No. After a busy week, you're tired. This is a systemic, physiological failure of the human body and mind.
And yet, society has managed to completely rebrand this systemic failure. The source argues that hustle culture cleverly equates our inherent personal worth with our daily economic productivity.
It creates this incredibly dangerous psychological trap where the grind becomes your entire identity.
Yes, the underlying logic that society pushes on us is completely insidious. Basically, the busier you are, the more important you seem.
You are looking at the literal commodification of exhaustion.
Wow. Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
The source points out how we are trained to look at someone working like a 16-hour day, and we feel a reflexive sense of admiration.
We equate their sleep deprivation with moral superiority.
Yeah. And the phrase the source highlights, wearing burnout as a badge of honor, it's a fascinating appropriation of military language.
Because a badge of honor is traditionally awarded for an act of supreme bravery, right? Or sacrifice in combat, usually to protect others.
Exactly. Yeah. But hustle culture has hijacked that deeply emotional language. And it applied it to the act of destroying your own mental health just to increase a corporation's quarterly profit margin.
It is a brilliant linguistic hijacking.
But, I want to actively push back on the binary nature of how we sometimes frame this debate, specifically regarding an analogy the source leans on.
Oh, the marathon analogy.
The Source Masterclass suggests that a healthy career should be viewed as a marathon, not a sprint. The implication is that pacing yourself is the ultimate virtue.
Right.
But if we look at the reality of a literal marathon, aren't there moments where you absolutely have to sprint?
Oh, sure.
Like if you're trying to get up a steep hill, or if you're trying to cross the finish line before the biological clock runs out, you have to dig deep and push your body to its absolute limit.
That's very true.
So is the core problem the sprint itself? Or is the problem the fact that hustle culture demands we sprint the entire 26 miles?
I mean, you've hit on the core biological truth there. A human being as an organism is actually remarkably well designed to handle acute stress.
Right.
When you sprint up a hill to meet a massive deadline, or when you pull long hours to launch a business you care deeply about, your body releases adrenaline and cortisol to get you through that highly compressed period of friction.
It's survival mode.
Exactly. The body can survive and even adapt and grow stronger from acute stress, provided there is a corresponding period of rest.
But the dysfunction of hustle culture is the total elimination of the recovery phase.
Yes. It demands a state of chronic, unending stress. The expectation that the hill simply never ends is what converts healthy ambition into the chronic physical and mental exhaustion the source identifies as burnout.
The motor just keeps running until it literally catches fire.
Pretty much.
But this brings us to the practical application of the masterclass. Because if you understand this dynamic, how do you actually communicate it in a professional environment?
Because you can't just walk into a performance review and bluntly declare, hustle culture is a toxic capitalist trap and I refuse to participate.
You are probably going to be fired, or at least completely marginalized.
And this is exactly where the advanced linguistic strategies from the source come into play. What's fascinating here is how Emma and John deconstruct the tools needed to discuss these polarizing, ego-driven topics without triggering an explosion.
The first major strategy they introduce is the concept of hedging.
Right. In the masterclass, Emma is demonstrating how to introduce a controversial opinion on labor dynamics. And she starts her sentence with the phrase, "I'm not totally sure I have a perfect answer, but I'd argue."
And novices to debate, or people who are just starting to learn the mechanics of persuasion, they often view that kind of phrasing as a sign of weakness.
They do. They assume that if you want to be respected, you have to come in incredibly hard, slamming your fist on the table and declaring absolute truths.
Like burnout is objectively evil.
Exactly. But the source points out that in advanced C1 level discourse, hedging actually demonstrates a profound level of nuance and humility and intellectual honesty.
Think about the psychological mechanics of what happens when you use an absolute statement. When you declare an absolute truth, the person across the table instantly experiences a micro spike in their threat response.
Their brain registers your absolute certainty as an attack on their own perspective.
Yeah, and their defensive walls immediately go up.
But by injecting that tiny buffer of uncertainty by saying, "I'm not totally sure I have a perfect answer," you are neutralizing their biological threat response.
You're signaling to the listener that you are a reasonable observer, not a fanatic.
You're actively inviting them to sit on the same side of the table and examine the problem with you. It's a highly strategic lowering of your weapons that changes the entire temperature of the room.
It fundamentally reshapes the power dynamic, which leads perfectly into the second brilliant tactic the source dissects, the strategy of conceding before countering.
Right. In the source, John demonstrates this by saying, "I can certainly appreciate the drive and ambition behind hustle culture. However, a healthy career should be a marathon."
He deliberately awards them a point before he takes the core argument away.
It is the rhetorical equivalent of martial arts. When two people are debating an emotional topic, the natural instinct is for both sides to build a fortress to defend their worldview.
And if you simply launch a frontal assault on their fortress, they'll just reinforce the walls.
But by starting with a concession, by genuinely validating the positive intention behind their beliefs, such as their drive and ambition, you are essentially walking around their fortress and standing right next to them.
You are establishing shared ground.
Yes. From that shared position of mutual respect, when you deploy the word however, they are exponentially more willing to follow your line of reasoning. You've proven that you are capable of seeing the world through their eyes.
You're basically communicating, I see the value in what you were doing, I just see a fatal flaw in the execution.
Exactly. It strips the hostility out of the disagreement entirely.
Before we leave this internal ecosystem of exhaustion, the source highlights a very specific grammatical pitfall that trips up many speakers when discussing this topic.
Oh, yes. They draw a hard line between the noun burnout and the phrasal verb burned out.
This distinction reveals how deeply grammar is intertwined with sociological framing.
The source clarifies that you use the noun form when discussing the systemic societal issue. You say, burnout is a serious problem.
The noun objectifies the phenomenon.
It turns an abstract feeling into a concrete medical and cultural entity that can be analyzed and debated from a distance.
But the source explicitly warns against saying, I have a burnout. Instead, you must shift to the phrasal verb to describe your personal lived experience.
You say, I burned out last year, or I am feeling incredibly burned out.
Getting that subtle shift right is the exact difference between sounding like someone clunkily translating vocabulary in their head and sounding like a natural, highly proficient speaker who understands the rhythm of the language.
It demonstrates mastery of context. You objectify the macro problem, but you internalize the micro experience.
To wrap up our time dissecting the language of the modern workplace, I want to deploy a strategy that the source itself uses to great effect: the rhetorical reflection.
Okay.
Emma poses a question in the masterclass that I want to directly pose to you, the listener. Do you ever feel guilty for taking a break, as if you should always be productive?
Whoa, that's a heavy one.
Let the weight of that question sit with you for a moment, that lingering guilt you feel when you sit on the couch on a Sunday afternoon. That is the ghost of hustle culture actively haunting your downtime.
It's the proof that the cultural narrative has successfully infiltrated your internal monologue.
Exactly.
The transition from that internal exhaustion to our next topic is a stark examination of scale. Just as the relentless demands of hustle culture lead to the burnout of the individual mind and body, the relentless demands of mass tourism lead to the physical burnout of our environments.
We're bridging the gap from the micro to the macro.
Yes. Moving from the psychological exhaustion of the human being to the structural and cultural exhaustion of our most historic, heavily trafficked cities.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because virtually everyone listening to this has participated in this exact dynamic.
We've all been tourists.
Yes, and we have all stood in a massive crowd of other tourists, secretly wishing they would all leave so we could enjoy the view.
The irony is real.
The source introduces this topic with incredibly vivid imagery, asking a profound question. Are we loving beautiful, historic places to death?
It frames mass tourism as a massive double-edged sword.
On one hand, tourism injects absolutely vital revenue into local economies. It creates millions of jobs and sustains entire municipal budgets.
But on the other hand, the sheer volume of humanity threatens to completely eradicate the authentic living cultures of these spaces, turning them into what the soul so accurately describes as soulless theme parks.
We use the cliché of the double-edged sword in advanced discourse, not because it's a highly original metaphor, but because it's an exquisitely efficient mechanism for instantly mapping a complex economic paradox onto a universally understood physical object.
Exactly. Every listener immediately grasps the duality of the consequence.
The paradox the source is exploring here is that the very attributes a traveler crosses an ocean to experience, like the quiet historic charm, the unique local bakery, the authentic rhythm of a neighborhood,
are actively destroyed by the presence of the traveler.
And the masterclass dives deeply into the modern technological catalyst that has put this destruction on hyperspeed, the Instagram effect.
The algorithm. It completely shatters the natural timeline of urban evolution.
It alters the physical geography of the world at an unprecedented velocity.
The source points out that before social media, a destination might gradually increase in popularity over 2 or 3 decades.
And that slow burn allowed the local infrastructure, the roads, the housing markets, the waste management systems to adapt organically.
But today, the source details how a single viral video can flood a quiet, unprepared neighborhood with tens of thousands of visitors in a matter of weeks.
The economic fallout for the people who actually live there is immediate and brutal.
The source utilizes a very specific advanced collocation to describe this housing crisis, noting that rents don't just inch up, they triple, referring to the phenomenon of AAA rent.
That phrase, AAA rent, is a perfect example of the punchy, authoritative language the masterclass is trying to teach.
A novice speaker might say, the rent became 3 times more expensive?
Which is grammatically correct, but it lacks impact. When you say the rent tripled, it hits the listener like a hammer.
And the reality of that rent tripling is the total displacement of the community.
The artisans, the teachers, the families who have maintained the cultural fabric of that city for generations can no longer afford to exist there.
They are pushed out to the margins, and their homes and businesses are replaced by rows of short-term vacation rentals and identical souvenir shops.
That is exactly how you arrive at the soulless theme park. The architecture remains, but the human soul of the city is evicted.
It's the hollowing out of a living ecosystem. Now, the source discusses how municipalities are desperately trying to manage this crisis, bringing up proposed sustainable solutions like implementing heavy tourist taxes or enforcing strict daily visitor limits at major cultural sites.
And we need to maintain absolute strict impartiality as we report on how the source handles this, because this specific debate represents an incredibly delicate, highly charged political tightrope.
It really does.
On one side of the ideological spectrum, you have the fundamental principles of a free market economy.
The argument is that if millions of people want to visit a location and local property owners want to rent out their apartments to tourists to secure a better financial future for their families, they should have the absolute right to do so.
Tourism is a massive wealth distributor.
But on the other side of the spectrum, you have the powerful argument for government intervention and regulation.
The belief here is that without strict controls, the free market will consume and destroy the cultural heritage and housing rights of the vulnerable local population.
It's a massive, ongoing tug-of-war between individual economic freedom and collective community preservation.
And examining how people advocate for either side of that tug-of-war brings us to one of the most powerful and controversial linguistic tools analyzed in the entire masterclass:
the strategic use of the passive voice.
The source highlights the specific phrase, locals are being driven out.
In standard grammar classes, the passive voice is almost universally demonized.
Oh, we are taught from day one to avoid it. We're taught to write, the dog bit the man, not the man was bitten by the dog, because the active voice is punchier and clearer.
But the Source Masterclass points out that in high-level advanced discourse, the passive voice is not a mistake. It's a highly calculated strategic choice.
By stating locals are being driven out, the speaker focuses the entirety of the listener's empathy on the victims of the situation without ever having to explicitly name a villain.
Because naming a villain in a macroeconomic crisis is incredibly complicated.
Who is the actual villain in mass tourism? Is it the family taking a summer vacation? Is it the local landlord trying to pay off their mortgage?
Is it the city council? Is it the engineers in Silicon Valley tweaking the Instagram algorithm?
The passive voice is perfectly designed for describing massive systemic issues, where the agent, the root cause of the action, is a complex web of interconnected forces, rather than one easily identifiable bad actor.
It allows a speaker to acknowledge a devastating reality without turning the debate into a hostile witch hunt, which usually just derails the entire conversation into finger-pointing.
I understand the utility of that, but, I have to actively push back against the source's framing here.
Really? How so?
While it might prevent a witch hunt, I think using the passive voice in these scenarios acts as a dangerous linguistic magic trick. It's a disappearing act for accountability.
I see what you mean.
By saying locals are being driven out, instead of saying hedge funds buying up residential real estate or driving locals out, or policymakers refusing to cap short-term rentals or driving locals out, you obscure the mechanics of the crisis.
You're hiding the actors.
Exactly.
Ah.
Doesn't this linguistic trick accidentally let the people with actual power off the hook? It makes the displacement of thousands of families sound like a natural weather event.
Like a hurricane rolled through.
Yeah. Oh, what a tragedy. The locals were driven out by the gentle, inevitable winds of the free market. It completely removes human choice, greed, and policy failure from the equation.
Well, you have just brilliantly deconstructed the exact danger of the passive voice. And in doing so, you've proven why studying it at a C1 level is so critical.
Because it can be weaponized.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are absolutely right that language can be weaponized to obscure accountability. The passive voice has the unique ability to make deliberate, calculated human actions sound like inevitable forces of nature.
Which is precisely why crisis PR firms, corporate executives, and politicians rely heavily on the passive voice when navigating scandals.
Phrases like mistakes were made or jobs were lost, they completely sever the devastating action from the actor who caused it.
Mistakes were made. That phrase drives me absolutely crazy. It is the ultimate abdication of responsibility. The mistake didn't just manifest out of thin air. Someone sitting in an office made the mistake.
But from a linguistic and strategic standpoint, understanding exactly how that syntactic trick works is what gives you the power to dismantle it in real time.
So how do you counter it?
If you're in a debate and your opponent uses the passive voice to say, unfortunately, the local culture is being erased, and you want to force accountability back into the room, your C1 level countermaneuver is to challenge the structure itself.
You lean in and ask, erased by whom?
Who specifically is holding the eraser? You force the active voice back into the narrative.
That is incredibly empowering. It's like seeing the underlying code of the matrix. You aren't just listening to the words anymore. You are watching the structural maneuvers.
And speaking of how words fit together structurally, the source also uses this segment on the tourism crisis to emphasize the critical importance of mastering natural collocations.
Collocations being the specific words that naturally and habitually bind together in a language, often without any underlying logical rule.
Right. The source points out that even highly intelligent advanced learners sometimes make the mistake of saying they want to make a debate or that a policy will make damage.
Logically, those phrases make perfect sense. You are creating a debate. You are causing damage.
But the masterclass emphasizes that a truly proficient speaker uses the established collocations. You spark a debate and you do damage.
This touches on the inherent musicality and cognitive rhythm of a language.
It does. If we look at English, why do we unanimously agree to say fast food, but we never say quick food?
Or why do we take a quick shower, but never a fast shower?
There is no grammatical law dictating that distinction. It's simply the accumulated historical muscle memory of the culture.
When a non-native speaker, or even a native speaker who isn't well read, says something like make damage, it is perfectly comprehensible, but it registers in the listener's brain like a wrong note played during a symphony.
It causes a micro moment of cognitive dissonance. The listener's brain has to pause for a millisecond to process the unusual pairing.
Mastering collocations like spark a debate removes that friction. It elevates your speech from being merely functional to being genuinely fluid, authoritative, and persuasive.
It signals to the room that you don't just know the vocabulary, you understand the deep intuitive rhythm of the culture itself.
I love that concept of removing the cognitive friction for the listener. And speaking of the rhythm and evolution of culture, the source leaves us with a profound, almost philosophical reflection at the end of this segment.
What is it?
If a historic city changes its entire infrastructure and economy to serve the needs of transient tourists, has it fundamentally lost its soul? Or is that transformation simply the natural, inevitable evolution of a living, breathing place?
Cities are not supposed to be static museums frozen in amber, right? They're supposed to adapt and survive.
But where exactly is the line where adaptation becomes total cultural erasure?
It's a question that urban planners and sociologists will be wrestling with for decades.
Truly.
And the transition from how we manage our physical communities to how we prepare individuals to participate in them brings us to our third and final area of analysis.
We've examined the linguistic framing of our labor, analyzing the psychological pitfalls of hustle culture.
We've explored the framing of our leisure and travel, deconstructing the paradox of mass tourism.
Now, the Source Masterclass requires us to examine the foundational institution that has traditionally prepared us to navigate both of those spheres, the university.
The great education debate.
We are looking at the very bedrock of how society dictates we build a successful career. The source lays out this final topic by presenting a stark, undeniable contrast that is currently reshaping the global economy.
On one side of the scale, you have the explosive, exponential rise of online learning.
Anyone with an internet connection can now learn highly complex skills, advanced Python coding, digital marketing, graphic design, structural engineering principles.
Often for a fraction of the cost of a formal education, or entirely for free through open source platforms and video tutorials.
On the exact opposite side of the scale, you have the reality of soaring, crippling, multi-generational student debt associated with attending traditional brick-and-mortar universities.
So the core question the masterclass uses to teach advanced argumentation is this. In an era of infinite free information, is a traditional university degree still relevant?
It's a debate that strikes at the heart of macroeconomic theory. For centuries, the university held a virtual monopoly on the transfer of high-level information.
If you wanted to access the greatest minds or the most comprehensive libraries, you had to pay the gatekeepers.
But if the primary function of education is simply the transfer of raw data from an expert to a novice, then the internet has irrevocably won the war. The monopoly is completely broken.
Exactly. If my only goal is to learn how to edit video or build a database, I absolutely do not need to sit in a lecture hall for 4 years while taking on massive debt.
I need discipline, a laptop, and an internet connection.
However, the Source Masterclass unpacks a highly sophisticated defense of the traditional university system.
It argues that a degree is fundamentally not about information transfer anymore. It acts as, and I love the specific phrasing they use here, a powerful signal to employers.
This is a brilliant distillation of signaling theory, a concept pioneered by economist Michael Spence. The source is highlighting that the physical piece of paper you receive at graduation transmits a complex array of behavioral data to a potential employer that a self-taught, solitary online curriculum simply cannot convey.
Wait, so the degree signals a proven capacity for long-term commitment?
Yes. It proves you can endure a rigorous, often tedious program for 4 consecutive years without quitting.
It signals executive function and the ability to manage competing, strict deadlines.
Crucially, it signals that you possess the necessary conformity to successfully navigate and participate in a massive, complex, bureaucratic system.
Which, if we're being completely honest with ourselves, is exactly what most modern corporate jobs actually are. You aren't being paid to just know facts. You're being paid to navigate a complex, often frustrating bureaucratic system while hitting deadlines.
Precisely. When an investment bank or a tech firm hires a graduate, they are not primarily buying the applicant's memorized knowledge of 18th century literature or abstract calculus.
That information is largely irrelevant to the daily tasks of the job.
They're buying the vetted, stress-tested character traits that were required to survive the friction of the university system.
Furthermore, the source emphasizes that the traditional university provides a structured environment of intense growth. It isn't just about the syllabus. It's about the physical and intellectual crucible of the seminar room.
It's the forced exposure to diverse, often uncomfortable ideas.
When you are in a university, you have to sit across a table from someone who vehemently disagrees with your worldview, and you have to learn how to construct a coherent, logical argument and defend it in real time while maintaining basic civility.
And of course, there is the massive advantage of social networking, the peers and professors you meet who form the foundational web of your professional life.
The source argues, quite persuasively, that you simply cannot replicate that transformative social friction by watching tutorial videos alone in your bedroom.
The linguistic distinction the source is drawing here is between the solitary acquisition of raw data and the communal, often uncomfortable process of intellectual and social maturation.
Let me introduce an analogy here to try and really ground the source's analysis. Think of the traditional university system like a wildly expensive, high-end gym membership.
Okay, I like that.
You can theoretically learn how to achieve peak physical fitness in your own backyard for absolutely free. You can lift heavy rocks, you can run up hills, and you can watch free biomechanics tutorials online to perfect your form.
The raw information on how to trigger muscle hypertrophy is identical, whether you're in a luxury gym or in the woods.
But the high-end gym provides the specialized, calibrated equipment. It provides a structured, climate-controlled environment designed solely for that purpose.
Most importantly, it provides the spotters.
Yes, the experienced professors and the competitive peers who are there to catch the heavy weight when your muscles fail so you don't crush yourself.
And being surrounded by a community of hundreds of other people straining to achieve the exact same goal provides a psychological motivation that is incredibly difficult to summon in isolation.
The gym analogy perfectly isolates the difference between the availability of information and the optimization of the environment.
But the ultimate crushing question the source is driving at remains: is that optimized environment, are those highly trained spotters and that motivated community actually worth the soaring, life-altering financial debt?
If the gym membership costs you $100,000 and guarantees you'll be paying it off for 20 years, at what point does it become financially irresponsible not to just lift the heavy rocks in your backyard?
And that profound tension is what makes this topic such a rich training ground for advanced linguistic debate. It requires a high-stakes, highly nuanced cost-benefit analysis.
The source provides us with excellent tools to navigate this specific kind of complex weighing of contradictory options.
The primary strategy highlighted in this section is the mastery of sophisticated discourse markers.
Discourse markers being the linguistic signposts that tell the listener where the conversation is heading next.
Exactly. In the masterclass, John acknowledges the immense validity and democratic power of free online learning, but then he pivots to defend the university by using the phrase, "Having said that."
The source spends time analyzing why this phrase is infinitely more sophisticated and effective than simply using the word but.
Because but is incredibly abrupt. It functions like a verbal stop sign.
If I say, you make a really good point about the debt, but you're wrong about the value, the word but essentially reaches backward and negates the complement that preceded it. It deletes your opponent's point from the record.
But is inherently adversarial. It creates an either dynamic. The phrase, "having said that," operates on a completely different cognitive level.
It acts as a bridge rather than a wall.
It signals to the listener, I have fully digested, respected, and accepted the valid information we just discussed. Now, maintaining the truth of that context, I am introducing a seemingly contrasting point.
It's the linguistic mechanism that allows two opposing ideas to exist in the same space simultaneously without instantly destroying one another.
Using "having said that" demonstrates a high level of cognitive flexibility and intellectual maturity.
It's the linguistic equivalent of patting your stomach and rubbing your head at the same time. You are holding two contradictory truths in your hands and weighing them fairly.
The source also uses this section on education to reflect on the various idioms they've deployed throughout the masterclass. Phrases we discussed earlier, like double-edged sword and badge of honor.
They note how these idioms, while perhaps common, are vital because they pull the speaker away from the rigid robotic syntax of a textbook and drop them into the fluid, colorful reality of how humans actually converse.
Idioms endure in advanced discourse because they are highly compressed zip files of cultural and emotional data.
Before we completely wrap up the university segment, let's hit one final microscopic grammar pitfall that the source warns about, which is rampant when non-native speakers discuss education.
The rigid rules around specific verbs.
Yes, you do not make a degree. You do a degree or you get a degree.
Yeah.
And even more treacherously, you do not assist a university. You attend a university.
The classic trap of false friends. They are the absolute bane of the advanced language learner.
They really are. Because in many Romance languages, words that sound identical to assist literally translate to attend or be present at.
But in English, if you confidently declare in a job interview that you assisted a prestigious university, it sounds utterly bizarre.
It sounds like you helped the physical building carry its groceries across the street. You assist a person. You attend an institution.
The source makes it clear that it is mastering these tiny, microscopic, seemingly illogical shifts that suddenly locks your language firmly into that elusive C1 level of fluency.
It's the fine-tuning of the instrument. It is the difference between playing the right notes and playing the music.
So what does this all mean?
Well, we arrive at the rhetorical reflection for this final segment. I want to pose the source's concluding question directly to you, the listener. If you could learn the exact same technical skills required for your dream job online, completely for free, would you still be willing to pay the massive financial premium to acquire the traditional university degree?
If we connect this to the bigger picture and synthesize the totality of this deep dive, what we have truly explored today is a comprehensive masterclass in the architecture of articulation.
We haven't simply learned about the neurological and sociological dangers of burnout.
We haven't merely explored the macroeconomic complexities of modern travel, gentrification, and the algorithm.
And we haven't just weighed the shifting, perilous economics of higher education.
We have learned how to discuss them. We have dismantled the engine of societal debate to observe how the linguistic gears interlock.
We have actively built a C1 level psychological toolkit. Let's quickly recap the absolute arsenal you now possess based on Emma and John's source material.
You understand the profound psychological power of hedging, using phrases like, "I'm not totally sure I have a perfect answer," to de-escalate the amygdala, soften your statements, and demonstrate intellectual nuance.
You know the verbal judo of conceding before countering. I appreciate the drive, however. to build incredibly persuasive, non-hostile arguments that invite collaboration rather than defense.
You understand the strategic, sometimes dangerous magic trick of the passive voice, saying, locals are being driven out to discuss massive systemic issues without getting bogged down in an unproductive witch hunt.
And, to rely on the cultural muscle memory of natural collocations, spark a debate, do damage, and the cognitive bridge of sophisticated discourse markers, having said that, to sound authoritative, fluid, and deeply reasonable.
The ultimate lesson, the core philosophy to extract from the Source Masterclass, is the empowering realization that true advanced communication is never, ever just about having the most expansive vocabulary in the room.
You do not need to memorize a thesaurus to be fiercely persuasive.
True fluency is a psychological endeavor. It's about active, empathetic listening. It's the courage to engage with the messy, gray areas of real-world issues rather than hiding behind binary absolutes.
It's the ability to express your own deeply held opinions with subtlety, empathy, and strategic skill.
Ultimately, mastery of a language is about understanding the fears and motivations of the human being sitting across the table from you.
I want to leave you with one final, brand new, highly provocative thought to mull over. This builds directly on the themes the source provided today, but pushes them one step further. It's something to keep you pondering long after this deep dive ends.
Let's hear it.
We discussed at length how a university degree functions as a powerful signal to corporate employers. And we discussed how the toxicity of hustle culture uses exhaustion and burnout as a signal of our moral dedication and worth.
Right.
It forces you to step back and wonder, how much of our actual lives, our chosen careers, and even our expensive travels to perfectly curated, Instagram-famous cities are driven by a genuine internal desire for the raw experience itself?
Oh, wow.
And how much of it is driven by the desperate, exhausting, lifelong need to simply signal our value to everyone else?
Are we actually living our lives, or are we just continuously compiling a resume of signals to prove that we exist?
That is perhaps the defining existential question of the modern, hyper-connected era. Language allows us to broadcast the signal, but only rigorous self-reflection reveals the truth behind it.
The world isn't a clean, binary X-ray. It's beautifully, frustratingly muddy waters.
But hopefully today, we've handed you a much sharper compass to navigate them. Keep questioning the systems around you, keep looking for the nuance in the noise, and thank you so much for joining us on this intellectual journey.